Tech by Tips.
Welcome to another Tech by Tips video, and video number 4 in the series of Introduction to Azure DevOps. And in this video we're going to continue our discussion on the boards section of Azure DevOps. Specifically, we're going to be comparing two boards, the actual boards section and the sprints section inside boards. So first, let's talk a little bit about the boards section. That one basically gives you an easy way to view the status or the progress of all the planned worked items, regardless of which sprint they belong in, but that have not been completed. So it gives you like a bird's eye view of the status of the project and how things are moving along. And as usual, it has a customizable web view, so you can change the interface. And then after that, we're going to be talking about the sprints section, which is what you use when you're actually working, because it gives you a better view of the story and its tasks, and it gives you a specific view of the project that is focused on the work that was planned for the current time slot or sprint. That's why it's called a sprint. And it also has a customizable web view, and we're going to see that too. So now let's go over seeing this in action in Azure DevOps. Let's look at how to use the boards. Okay, in a previous video we created here a hierarchy of items so we could see how they tie together, like epic to feature to story. And now in this video, to showcase the differences between the boards and the sprints, within the stories point of view, I created extra stories so that we can see how it all behaves. So in this case, this story 2 and 3 and 4 are not tied to any epic or feature or anything. And let me just make sure that I change here the configuration of the sprint, because I don't want them to be on the same sprint yet. So let's go here really quickly and change the assignment here on the iteration path for these stories to be just the project. So now the thing that I want to show is how it differs when you look at the work items that you have in your project, when you look at it from the boards view versus the sprint view, and why they're there, what their uses are, right? So we have 4 stories right now. If we go into the boards still shows us all the stories, and we're at the story level. If I go into the epics level, then we're only going to see 1, because I only have 1 epic created. I said that the other 3 stories were not related to epics or features. So if I go into features, it's the same again. So if I go at the story level, you see all the different stories. So as you can see, the boards section give us the opportunity to look at all the items that we have planned, no matter which sprint they're assigned to, and as long as they're not done, like as long as you haven't completed the work. So if we have a story, for example, that is currently active, you can see the status of that. The other stories are new, that one is active, and it can be like on any state. And you will see everything that has not been closed and has been created in here. You can see, like I showed before, that you can go back to different levels. So it applies the same to epics, to features, and to stories. So if you have an epic that is active and you go into the epic view, you'll see that it is active. If you have features that are active, it'll move to active and you'll see it here. So it works the same way for everything. So if your project, it's a very small project where you don't really have a planned backlog of many things that you have in a queue, you could actually work on the boards section, but it's just a little more complicated. It's not as easy to see how everything is going, because for example, this one here has a task, but you cannot see the task clearly, what the progress of that is. You don't see if the task is active, if it's done or what. Well, if it were done, you would see it here, but it's not as easy to see in the board. So normally what most companies do is that they work in the sprints section, okay? But within the boards, you have the ability to customize the view that you have here You can see analytics if you actually had something done. And you can switch back from the backlog view from the boards. So you can always do that. The columns that you have here can be customized. The view can be customized as we have already seen. And here we can have the filter that is very useful if you have a lot of work items. And then if you go into the configure board settings, here you can change things like we saw before. We can change the navigation levels, set the days that are for our team to work. But you have other things. For example, in the cards, you have options here that what you want to see in the card when you click on something and you open it. You have styles here, colors for the tags, annotations that you can disable or enable, tests, the columns, you can change them here. You can even add new columns. For example, the usual agile are new, active, resolved, and closed, but you can just add a new column, move it wherever you want, and remove it also if you don't need it. You can create swim lanes, for example, if you want to have a separate swim lane for things. For example, the planned work is in one swim lane, and you can have like emergency work. For example, if you have some sort of production issue or bug that is really crucial, you can put it in different lanes. And when you save that, you'll see that you have different lanes here where you can put the stories, so you can call attention to those things easier. So you can also delete swim lanes that you don't need, so it's really easy. You can change how the ordering of the card goes when you move them from column. So you can click here and it'll show you an animation of how it behaves when you move it. And this is the other type where whenever you move it, it goes based on the backlog order. So there's plenty of customizations here, but they're not really that impressive, honestly. In my opinion, I haven't used them a lot. Mainly whenever I've done any customization here, it's been changes to the swim lanes or the columns mostly. But you have that, now you know what the boards are, what you can use it for, and the difference where you can see everything that has not been completed. Now, if we go to our sprints area, you can see here that we only have one story in comparison with boards where we could see all the 4 stories. That's why in this case, we're only looking at all the planned work that has been assigned to our time frame. And in this case, the time frame that we're looking at is the one that we named Sprint 1. So if we switch from here, which is the current sprint, to a future sprint, since I haven't assigned anything to this sprint, you'll see nothing. You can also go back into previous sprints if you have already passed them and done work. So you can always go back in sprints too. But the good thing about the sprint view is that inside the sprint view, you get to be very granular in how you see the state of things going. For example, in this case, this story has one task. And this task, I can see it clearly. I can see that it's a new task that hasn't been worked on. Let me also unassign this task. Because another interesting thing here is that when you, let's say you're working here, you grab this task and you move it to active. The moment you move it to active, it is assigned to you, if it wasn't assigned to anybody else. So it immediately updates the state and who is the person in control of this task, for example. You can always remove it and go back to unassign if that's necessary. But yes, the important thing is you only see the things in the current sprint or in the sprint that you select. And you can filter also. You can filter for things that belong only to you, or that have not been assigned, or for everyone. So there's many ways for you to customize how you view this. Okay, when you click on the title of a story or a task, then it'll open the card. And it's a very similar card to what we saw before, where you have the state. So you can change the state by dragging and dropping into another column, or you can just come here and change the state, and then it'll do the same thing. You can also remove it from the sprint or move it to another sprint if it's necessary, and change the project also if that's necessary. And you can put the description here and the comments and the discussions as we mentioned before. Usually the task will have some kind of estimate of what the level of effort is going to be like, and then it tracks, like you can track how much is left, how much has been completed, and you can also link it to other parts. In this case, by default, it's going to be linked to the parent, which is the story that it belongs to. But we have the options on the right here. As we saw before, you can see history. So in this case, since I moved this task around and I did things, you can see the history of things, right? The story was created, then it was moved from new to closed, and then it was from closed to new again, and it shows you who even made the changes, right? So this is how you see the history, and you can see like a graph of the history. And in here, if you go to the right side of that, we'll see the links, how it relates to other work items. And if you go to the very end here, you have attachments if you have any in there. So it's very similar to what we saw before. So yeah, that's the card of a task. And if you go into the story, you have basically the same thing, but at the story level. You can manage your work, make notes, put attachments and all that, and then you can see the status of everything here. That's good for management too, because then management can see, you know, what is happening, what work is being done. One of the things that you can do here is if you change the columns, if you change the columns here, you can add, for example, an extra column that would be, let's say, here before resolved, right? And we could say that it is blocked. For example, if there's a blocker for this task, then you can see it clearly. The whole team can see it. And if you see something here, management can also come in, or a scrum master or whoever's responsible for that, and help that person out to unblock that story, to get whatever information they need or any help they need to move the story ahead. So it's very good, because when you're working on the sprint, nobody has to be like micromanaged. Everyone can see what's happening. Anybody can help anybody else. Management is aware of everything. So that's the main important thing. You work on your sprints, because that's how you plan your work. And whenever all the tasks are completed based on the time, like if all the tasks were completed early in the sprint, that tells you that maybe you have space to add more capacity to that sprint. So your team is capable of solving more than what you planned for. And if you find the case, for example, where a lot of the tasks are not being completed by the end of the sprint, then you know that you're biting more than you can chew. And then you can scale that down a little bit to a velocity that your team can actually perform well at. From here, again, you can also go back into the backlog view, but it stays here in the sprints, but you just see it as a backlog. And you also have the capacity here, which you can use for capacity planning. If, for example, there's days off and things like that, you can see that clearly. And if you have data about the sprint, then you would see it here. For example, you can see a burn down graphic as things get completed. So this is the sprints, and this is how you work with it. It's very high view, because this is just an introduction, but I hope you find this useful and you get a better understanding of the difference between the boards and the sprints and how you use the sprints. Another thing is, I didn't mention it here, but when we go into the backlog, we can add the stories to a sprint from here directly. So I just added story number 2 to the sprint. So if I go into the sprints now, you'll see that now I have that extra story there. Additionally, if the team completed the tasks that they needed and they had space and they're going to add new things, or if something came up and you need to add a story there, you can clearly click here where it says new work item, and it'll create it as a story or a bug, however you choose it to be, and then it'll be added into the sprint. If you have a story and you don't have anything there, you can easily create tasks and bugs by going here and creating a card for it, depending on what you choose. So it's very easy, anybody can manage it, and usually the person that is working on the story is the one that puts all the tasks and makes it easy for people to understand what's going on with the story. So I'm going to leave it here. We're going to continue on the next part of the series on the next video. So I'm hoping you're liking this series, See you in the next one. Remember, if you like the content, like and subscribe to the channel. Feel free to share the videos, and also remember that I'm not monetizing this channel, so if you want to support me to continue creating content like this that you find useful and educational, feel free to donate using the link in the description below to PayPal or using Bitcoin, and I'll appreciate it very much. So see you on the next one.